It's on up there. I think it's okay now. Is that okay? It is being live streamed. We're not going to show the audience. Yeah, he will. Glenn will do whatever he needs to do. I want to share with you some principles of boosting your immune health that you probably read about in grades 7, 8, and 9 back in elementary school and high school. A lot of which we don't pay attention to. COVID, the wonderful blessings of a pandemic is we learn about public health techniques that we've just ignored for years. And I'll touch on that a little bit. My business partner and I wrote this program about 20 years ago. He and I updated it 10 years ago, and that was before COVID. We've updated it again. He did. I wasn't there anymore, but he updated it just last year to include some COVID's kind of infectious disease stuff. But you know what? It didn't change anything in the presentation. We can just add COVID to the data now, but the principles are still the same. And there's basically 4 strategies to look at. I guess I better get caught up here. And you can see number 1, limit exposure to germs, viruses, and sick people. We didn't pay any attention to that before COVID. But that's a biblical public health principle. What did our great ancestors do when someone came down with an infectious disease like leprosy? What'd they do? They didn't put them in isolation. Yeah, they did, but they put them way over there in isolation. I mean, you couldn't even go administer to them. If you did, you were unclean. Now, that's an extreme example, of course. And today we know that leprosy isn't transmitted that easily, but you want to be careful you don't play with any armadillos when you go down south, because the armadillos in the wild ate the bandages and the leftover fingers and toes that were burned in the piles and left there to let nature take its course. And so about 40 to 60% of armadillos are carrying leprosy. Yes. So you don't want to be playing around with an armadillo. Who would? Scientists, I suppose. You want to develop a healthy immune system, which is your natural defense. What's the most important principle for your immune system? The most important, most significant thing about your immune system is never get old. Okay? And that's something that we have no control over. So we want to do all the other stuff to help our immune system. Develop a healthy lifestyle. And these are things you've heard many times. Regular exercise, eating some good food, eating less of the bad food, getting adequate sleep, and getting regular medical care. And I am going to say getting immunizations when indicated. Now, we belong to a group of folks, but we're not unique. Many folks will not get immunized for COVID. But they did get immunized for smallpox and mumps and rubella and diphtheria and a whole bunch of other things. There are over 26 immunizations available. And do you know there are some countries that if you choose to travel in some countries in Africa and South America, you cannot go there unless you've got documentation of the immunizations they demand you to have. Unless you're over 60. No, it may not be recommended for you to get that yellow fever immunization because you're what? You're too old to really benefit from it. And the problem is with yellow fever is if you get it, there's no cure for it. So you either survive or you die. Not many people die of yellow fever, but there's no, other than ventilators and, aspirin and ibuprofen, there's not much you can do for yellow fever.
I'm assuming it's a live.
It is It's an attenuated live vaccine. I think that's the right word. Isn't it? Talk to my scientist friend over there. He's not sure either. But it is a live vaccine, but it's attenuated, yeah. There are a few people that are super vaccinators, meaning they never need to be vaccinated against anything. They must have an immune system like Adam. There's a few people. I would like to be like that person, but there's not many. I've met one, and I tried to convince him to go to Loma Linda and get vigorously tested, but he wasn't interested. But he's the kind of guy that took the smallpox vaccine and it rebelled against him, and he couldn't take it. He couldn't take any vaccine. And when he tested it, he was positive for all the things that needed to be tested for. But he wasn't a super carrier. Well, I didn't ask him about hepatitis, but anyways. We need to limit exposure to germs, and we were extremely benefited in coughing like this. And then I asked some professors, well, who washes their elbow? But the thing is, we were trying to expose less outside. And that's the great benefit of, if there is a benefit to COVID, is we learned how to protect ourselves and to not transmit it to others. Wear a mask. Boy, were we encouraged to wear a mask. But this isn't just for COVID. I tried to find this study, but it was too old in my databases. But there was a study in Chicago, when I lived in Chicago in the 80s. They took 5 elementary schools were the placebo, and they took another 5 elementary schools, and they made them, and I mean made them, wash their hands before they come into school. Everybody, students, parents, teachers, they washed their hands. They washed their hands every time they went to the bathroom, washed every time they ate food, and washed their hands when they went out at the end of the day. They made them do that for, I forget now, a couple of months. The placebo had all the usual colds and flus that year. The experimental group had 90% less colds and flu that year. So if someone tells you masks don't work, they just don't know enough about science. Washing your hands is really important. That may be more important, but masks work. Why? Because when you're coughing, you've got saliva and liquid with that, and the virus is attached to that. The virus is too small to go. The virus is small enough to go through masks, but not when it's attached to a water droplet. And if you don't believe in masks, tell your surgeon next time you have surgery, don't wear your masks anymore. It's not important. Anyways, we were overwhelmed with public health principles these last couple of years, and we just frankly got tired and sick of it. And I understand completely. Washing your hands and surfaces. Don't touch your nose, mouth, or eyes. Boy, that's hard to do. Strengthen your immune system. Don't get older. Yeah, like that's going to work. But you see the others there: lack of sleep, poor nutrition, obesity, high blood pressure, chronic inflammation, exercise, stress levels, lack of immunization for a disease. Are
those listed or ranked according to priority?
Not in that particular slide. And I do have slides that rank some of them a little bit more important than others, but I didn't want to take the time to go through the detail of the science because it would take, I could explain it all, but it just takes time. If you have a chronic disease, that automatically makes you at high risks. But if that chronic disease is well stable, is well treated, is stabilized, you negate that by at least 90% or so. So if you're diabetic or you're hypertensive, make sure you're treated well. It's the uncontrolled diabetic, it's the uncontrolled hypertensive, it's the uncontrolled, what else? Lupus and other things that seriously depress your immune system. So we have a wonderful miracles out there called medical science. Follow those so that you're treated well. Yes. Okay. Again, you have to treat it properly. I've got some slides that'll come in later that increases our inflammation response. So we'll talk about that. Like McDonald's hamburgers, twice a day are increasing your inflammation response. Once a week, once a month is no big deal. Vegetarians have historically less inflammation, but they can still have inflammation. So you need to figure out what that is, work with your doctor, particularly work with your dietitian. They can help figure out what that is, and then you can minimize those. A personal story, I didn't know I had celiac disease until at age 50 I came down with osteoporosis, severe osteoporosis, because I couldn't absorb fat. I couldn't absorb vitamin D. I couldn't absorb calcium. And all those are very important in osteoporosis. And so finding out what inflames you is part of the life history. And if you've got a physician you're working with and they can't figure it out, don't hesitate to get second and third opinions. Sometimes they're not covered by insurance, unfortunately, but I would encourage you to do that. Now, as we age, persons over 70 were 10 to 27 times more likely to die from COVID than those less than 60. That was well documented. So as we get older, we want to realize what's more vulnerable and why, and figure out what you can do. I'm a strong recommendation of immunization. Some people aren't, and that's okay. I do believe in free will, but I believe in the miracles of immunization and modern science as well. Some strategies to boost your immune system is fresh air. And I heard someone talking, they get drinking water when you're exercising your dog. That's excellent, you're getting fresh air. And this isn't a new phenomenon, but the government for years is wanting us to close up our houses, to use less energy to heat it, use less energy to air condition it. And your house shouldn't be 100% efficient. It should only be 80% efficient, or even less, because we need the fresh air. I was raised in the Canadian wilderness, and my dad trained us to keep our windows open all night. We raised our windows 2 or 3 inches all night. We had lots of covers on, and we had what is called a feather tick. You know what a feather tick is? It's about this thick, a bedspread about this thick, full of duck feathers, goose down. And we were toasty warm all night, but we breathed fresh air the whole night. It wasn't just fresh, it was cool. Now, some people always ask the question, how cold can it be when you should not exercise outside anymore? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I just told somebody today, never let
In North Carolina, that's a 100% true statement. Now, I was raised in Canada, and as a teenager, playing hockey in the wintertime, we listened to the weather report at the airport at 6 o'clock in the evening. If it was 19 below or warmer, we were told to play hockey outside. If it was 20 below or colder, the hockey games, all outdoor sports, were canceled. Does it ever get that cold in North Carolina? No. Now, you may not be used to breathing that colder air, and that's another issue. Okay, so it's really not too cold to exercise if you're dressed for it and you wear a scarf, if you want to wear a mask or something. I've skied in probably half the ski resorts in Canada and the US, and I've skied many times when it's below zero weather. I've never been cold. My nose has been cold, and my cheeks have been cold, but my body has never been cold because I'm dressed for it, of course. We had a saying in Canada, there's no such thing as cold weather. There's only weather you're not prepared for. So, do you ever wear long underwear in North Carolina? I do all the time. If it's 40 degrees or less, I wear long underwear just because I can. Good for you. So it gives us increased energy, improves digestion. After dinner, take a walk. And that's especially important for diabetics. Take a 15, 20-minute walk after eating a meal. Not brisk, not vigorous, but moderate. And it'll help with insulin resistance. Clean the lungs, reverses stress and anxiety, booster the immune system. We have a T cell called a natural cancer cell, a natural killer cell, that we want to enhance that because we will be exposed to viruses and bacteria. And it's actually a good idea to be exposed to the usual and customary vaccines or viruses so that we have some resistance built up already when you're exposed to a lot. So it's not bad being a teacher and living in a petri dish if you're healthy. Sunlight. Poorly lit room, viruses can survive for 32 minutes. In a well-lit room, they're likely to survive only 2.4 minutes. Years ago, we had Adventist hospitals who had at the end of every hallway what is called a solarium. They found that they put diabetics and hypertensives in the solarium. They had better insulin control, and they had better response to their blood pressure treatments, whatever they were going through. Today, we don't do that because those solariums are very expensive. It's wasted space in our minds, and the medicines we have today work faster. But don't forget about sunshine and the concept of solarium. The other thing is, if you're having trouble sleeping at night, you want to make sure your brain knows the sun is up there midday, somewhere between 10 and 2. You want your brain, through your eyes, to see sun. Not look at the sun, but see sun, the sunshine. That tells your brain that it's wide awake and we got less melatonin then, so it produces more melatonin later, which helps you sleep. I don't object to taking melatonin supplements if you need it. Just make sure it doesn't come from a cow. Yep. There was a robot created that would circulate around whatever room they wanted it to, and it emitted aggressive ultraviolet light, and you couldn't go in for fear of being blinded. It was very aggressive. And in fact, I put one of these in my furnace in my home. As a result of COVID, I found out that I could put an aggressive ozone generator. You could use ozone or you can use ultraviolet. And it filters the air. It zaps the air before it goes into my house. And yep, yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good idea. You can all. Yeah, that's true. You can, and if you have a hot water tub or a jacuzzi tub, rather than keeping it clean with chlorine, you can use ozone. You can buy an ozone generator. They're not that expensive. They're just cumbersome to install. But you can use ozone for hot water heaters, for jacuzzi heaters. Yeah. Good idea. It's, in the long run, it's cheaper.
What does it do to the
Mm-hmm.
caused by ozone therapy or ozone strategy.
It's creating ozone, but I've never read any studies to talk about as good or bad for the ozone at the Antarctic. I can only think it couldn't hurt anything. That's what I read about 10 years ago, that the hole is closing. Whether it's closed or not today, I haven't heard. Yeah, they stopped the fluorocarbons quite a few decades ago, I think. Anyways, vitamin D. All the immune cells have vitamin D receptors. So, yeah, we'll get to that. Vitamin D helps activate the T lymphocytes, which are the natural killer cells. Vitamin D helps reduce inflammation so the immune system can work better. Now, we've got a number of studies, but in this particular one, those with low vitamin D levels were more likely to get COVID and more likely to die from it. Now, these were the earlier studies, okay? The COVID we have coming around now is kind of like the flu. It'll affect the really compromised individuals, but if you're healthy, you'll get a cold and flu-like symptoms and you'll likely survive and not go to the ER. We will all come down with COVID once or twice or 3 times within the next few years, and most of us will be just fine. But you'll be finer if you follow some of these principles. Vitamin D, good for bone and muscle health, lung health, mental, mood, outlook. If you don't get enough sunshine in the day, then you should be taking at least 2,000 international units per day. Now, you can take too much. In the Northeast, every fall and winter, the physicians will routinely give their patients 5,000 to 6,000 international units a day, and then wean them off in the springtime. You likely cannot hurt yourself with 2,000 international units a day, but you could with 4,000 to 6,000. So work with your doctor to figure out what you need. And if you're getting sunshine, you only need about 20 minutes of sun on about 10% of your body to get enough conversion of your cholesterol into vitamin D. If you have enough cholesterol. I was genetically predisposed to have hypocholesterolemia, which means I have low cholesterol. That's good for my heart, bad for my bones, because I couldn't absorb vitamin D. So we need sunshine, and I got lots of it. But I came down with osteoporosis at age 50. My bones were as weak as someone 80, 85 years of age. And I ran every day, I rode a bicycle every day. Now that's what genetics does to you. Okay? And it took me and my physician colleagues 10 years to figure it out. It's amazing. I remember hearing about this celiac disease at Loma Linda, and it was so rare we didn't even worry about it. Okay? Same with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. It was so rare we didn't worry about it. What is that? Well, we call it mad cow disease too. But that's another lecture I could give on another topic. I won't go there today, unless someone asks me more questions. Maintaining a healthy weight. Excess weight is a risk for diabetes, high blood pressure. Diabetes is twice. Coronary heart disease. Yeah. Obese persons were 46 times more likely to contract COVID and 48% more likely to die from COVID. This is from the early COVID studies, okay? Again, if you're overweight, all you got to do is if you're obese, lose 15 pounds. That tells the body things are changing, revs up the immune system. You don't have to be normal, healthy weight to be healthy. You just need to be moving in that direction slowly. And if you are morbidly obese, you need to get down into the overweight category and not the obese category. There's really no risk to being overweight. In fact, some studies have shown that as we get older, we should be overweight because it gives us a little bit more reserve to take care of the flus and colds that we will get as we age. Again, don't age. That's the secret. Don't age. Yes. Okay. Clay says he likes to be warm in the winter and shady in the summer. I like that. Again, I've never found overweight to be a risk in any patients I dealt with. They may not want to be overweight, but that little extra can be a benefit. But it's the 40% BMI or higher that gets us in significant trouble. Severe obesity, that is the 40% rate there, 40%, 90% increased mortality in obesity. So we prevent obesity by choosing unrefined foods, primarily plant foods. Keep serving sizes moderate. And that is so hard in America. There isn't any meal I eat out in a restaurant that every meal I eat out in a restaurant, I should take half of it home. And quite often, when the three of us eat out, my wife and her mother share a meal. And then I eat the whole thing. I usually eat the whole thing, I'll just be honest with you. High fiber foods, emphasize fruits and vegetables, limit soft drinks and sweets, and I like to say no soft drinks and only use healthy homemade sweets. Well, be physically active. Now, I want to talk about vegetables for a minute. All of us have a vegetable, one or two, that we don't like. Tell me some of your favorite vegetables you don't like. That you don't like. Turnip greens, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. I don't like spinach. I'm not spinach. I don't like southern greens. I don't like greens. Okay? We all have vegetables we don't like, and that's okay. You just need to eat them anyways. Why? Because we need a wide variety of unrefined foods to get all the variety of vitamins and minerals and the thousands of antioxidants that are available in foods. Okay, you're taking the thunder away, Jane. If there's only one or two that you don't like, that's okay. Make sure you're getting adequate of the others. Okay? Next week, next Monday, I'll be talking about a mind health, the best brain health diet that we can eat. And there's 15 factors that we'll talk about. Fruit takes up 3 or 4 of those factors. And so we need to eat not just one berry, we need to eat many berries. And, that variety. I can't tell you how many people I've seen in my office when I was working say, I can't eat fruit. They don't eat fruit. That's just so foreign to me. Now, everybody who came to see me knew I was a vegetarian, and they knew I didn't require them to be a vegetarian. I did require them to pay attention, though, to quantity and quality of foods. I never told my meat eaters to eat no meat. I told them to eat meat about the size of your hand, if it's a small hand, once a day would be fine to maintain your meat-eating status. I was raised a meat eater. Anybody here raised a meat eater? Okay. When I ate meat, twice a week we had bacon and sausage for breakfast, 2 or 3 bologna sandwiches or hot dogs for lunch, and a pot roast or a meatloaf or a T-bone steak that was about that big, okay? And that's 4 times what you should eat in one day. And so I had all of my patients eat fruits and vegetables and nuts and grains and seeds. And after they've eaten all of that, eat as much meat as you want. Well, you can't eat that much more. And they got down to smaller points. And you know what? They got feeling better. Their blood sugars went down. Their diabetes was better controlled. The blood cholesterols went down. The good ones went up and the bad ones went down. Now, a lot of people pick on diabetics and they, their risk factor. But the point is, if you're diabetic, just be well treated. Have it well under control. COVID and diabetes did not work well together. But if the controlled diabetes was controlled, then it was almost okay. But when you get out of control diabetes and high blood pressure and overweight, those were the 3, and you add smoking to that, it's a death sentence to those that come down with COVID. So what do we learn from COVID? Make sure you're well-controlled diabetes. Make sure your blood pressure is well-controlled. And work with your doctors. The best patients I ever had were diabetics, especially pregnant diabetics. And they would come down with just gestational diabetes. And they did everything I asked them to do, 100% guaranteed. Best patients I ever had. Why? Because they wanted to do whatever was right for that baby. They stopped smoking. They didn't gain too much weight. You only need to gain about 20, 25 pounds when you get pregnant. But, we tolerate 50 or 60 because that's what happens sometimes. My wife worked in OB for many years, and she would get so frustrated when she'd come home. These unwed teenage girls would come in and deliver a baby and just kind of comes right out. They gained about 18 pounds and the baby weighs 8 pounds. And then these 35-year-old women would come in that gained 60 pounds and they cried and cried and cried and screamed and screamed and screamed throughout the whole pregnancy. Throughout the whole delivery process, I mean. And it's just unfair when you're so young, you don't want a baby, it's so easy to have a baby. Okay, I think I'm off topic. So a much higher mortality rates with uncontrolled diabetics. Now, when you look at chronic diseases as a whole, and you're talking about cardiovascular disease, COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, kidney disease, various kinds of cancers, high blood pressure, and diabetes, any one of those, or any 3 of those, or all of those, almost guaranteed a death sentence in COVID. Why? Because it was unique. And for the first 6 months, the doctors didn't know what to do. Okay? Well, they struggled. They could treat the symptoms, but the symptoms weren't getting taken care of because there was a cytokine response, which is an allergic response to this invading virus that the body just said, hey, this is bad, I'll give you everything I got. And the immune system gave those persons, unfortunate persons, everything they had, and it was too much. And it was kind of like when Jesus was in Gethsemane and had this issue of blood running out of his skin. It's called desiccated, intercoagulated something. It's like Ebola. It's like a hemorrhagic virus. You just bleed from every organ. Every organ in your body is bleeding. And the angel came down and administered to Jesus. And Jesus agreed to go on with his sacrifice. Yeah, thank you. And it's an unfortunate response, but it's a over response to an infection. And Jesus' infection was the sin of the world, and the body's natural response was to give everything it's got. And that was too much for a normal human. And Jesus needed help with the angels to come in and was ministered to, was cured, and went on then to die on the cross at Calvary. So we need to get vitamin D to boost our immune system. Adequate sleep. As we age, again, don't get older, but as we age, some of us can't sleep well. And if you wake up and can't go back to sleep, get up and read a book. Get up and do some Bible study. Get up and play Scrabble. Just get up and do something. Pretty soon your eyes will start getting sleepy and you go back to sleep. It's okay. And I don't have this in here, but if you take a nap during the day, that's a really good idea. 20-minute, maybe maximum 30-minute nap is excellent, especially for those that can't help but get older. If you take a nap that's 2 hours and it negatively affects your ability to go to sleep at night, that's not a good thing. If you drink coffee at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock and it keeps you awake, don't drink coffee. If you can drink it early in the morning, okay. This is when I say this at camp meeting, someone raises their hand, but I thought we weren't supposed to drink coffee. I don't care about coffee. It's a molehill, it's way down here, a little tiny thing. Don't worry about coffee. These other things I mentioned are much, much more important. In fact, there's some studies that suggest if you're drinking some coffee, you'll have less risk of Parkinson's disease. So that's something to consider. Have you ever been told by a doctor to go home and drink some fluid and get some rest? That's why. You want to just don't confuse your immune system. Let it start resting. Kind of stick to a sleep schedule. When we were younger, our parents put us to bed at a certain time, and then we get up and we always went to bed at a certain time, and we kind of lose sight of that as we get older. When our children were preteens, we made them go to bed early. Why? There's 2 reasons why. Number one, they need the sleep. They just don't need it. But mom and dad needed some quiet time. Okay? And I'm not embarrassed to say that. In fact, when I left my office, I usually walked around the mall for 30 minutes before I went home. Because I knew the kids were waiting for me. And I wanted to play ball with them. I wanted to engage with them. But I wanted to be happy about it. Okay, so the bedroom should be a fun place, should be cool, dark, quiet. Try not to put a TV in your bedroom. I know some of us have 8 or 9 TVs in our house, and garage, and workshop, and motorhome. So, nothing wrong with a TV as long as it doesn't control your life, but don't nap late in the day, be physically active. Relieve your worries before retiring. Give all your worries and cares to God. There's a good Christian principle there. Maintain a positive, happy attitude. Positive emotions enhance your immune system. People who experience loneliness, anger, trauma, infections last longer. Oh, and I should have put this study in here and I forgot. A study about 20 years ago was done on a cardiac unit. They had a cardiac unit with about 50 beds going out this way, another 50 beds going out that way. So they decided to treat all of these post-cardiac patients with love and kindness and prayer, remote prayer, and they treated these people they got good cardiac surgery, but they just treated them with nothing extra. They got their medicines, they got their water on time, they got their food on time, but the experimental group with kindness and loving on the floor and remote prayer actually had less infections, less post-op infections than the placebo group who got no extra care. So it's a good idea to visit our lonely people in the nursing home. Socially interaction can be beneficial, but just remember, being alone doesn't always equate to being lonely. But you have to figure that out. Everybody's a little bit different. %52 fewer deaths from infections for those that have higher optimism scores. But it's true with all causes. But look at heart disease and stroke, respiratory distress. And this is what COVID affected most, is a respiratory function in humans. The one benefit of immunizations is, it's an unfortunate benefit. It identifies some areas that doctors need to pay attention to. So a lot of people had some heart irregularity and an inflammation as a result of the COVID vaccine. So that means doctors need to pay attention to those folks. Maybe they need to be treated for some underlying heart condition. And this often happens with immunizations. It can wake up some areas. But most people have no problems with immunizations. Unfortunately, the physician's desk reference, or the PDR, was made available about 30 years ago to all consumers. And consumers read this and said, oh, I can't take this blood pressure medicine because I'll get a headache or I'll have heart inflammation. Yeah, 1% will, or 2%, but the miracles of modern science should at least be evaluated. Whether you follow them or not, that's another question. There we go. Psychological stress was associated with an increased risk of acute respiratory illness. And this is what happened in COVID. Because it was such a unique virus, those with respiratory infections, those with chronic respiratory issues were more affected vigorously. Take time to relax and unwind. Exercise. Now, I'm not going to talk about exercise very much. Dr. Markov, January 9, is going to spend the whole topic on exercise. And it'll be exciting. It'll be interesting. She's teaching this exercise class at Western Carolina University presently. And I'm going to devote to that, or default to that mostly, but just to say 150 minutes a week, or less than 10 minutes a week, we have 2.5 times the risk or mortality for COVID disease. A little bit of exercise helps, but this seems to be the best. And how about getting more than 150 minutes a week of exercise? There is a number where it becomes less beneficial for you, and it's somewhere in the 250 to 300 minutes per week range when you're not used to it. If you build up to it and you're used to it over time, like marathoners, that can be fine. But quite often when a marathoner quits running a marathon, they'll come down with a cold or a flu the following week. And so you want to pay attention to but you're not exercising vigorously. Mild to moderate exercises at that level is not a problem, but it's the vigorous exercises like the marathoners it's the marathoners with the super immune systems that don't get sick. So in all of these situations, exercise and COVID complications those that are exercised had less hospitalizations, less admission to intensive care, and less died. Okay, this is where I'm going to meddle just a little bit. We're going to talk about nutrition. Again, the first thing there, what affects your immune system is age, so don't get older. Okay, I've run that joke to death, okay, but I can't help it. Huh?
Alternative is
Yeah, that's right. Alternative is bad. But don't forget about these other risk factors. But we're going to talk about nutrition now. While nutrition is just one of the many factors, it may be well over 50% important versus some of these others. But at any rate, we need to eat a balanced diet with healthy lifestyle. A critical nutrition theme is to eat a wide variety of unrefined foods. If we did that, we'd have no trouble. But we don't eat a wide variety of unrefined foods. We eat 10 or 15 foods over and over again, and they're usually not unrefined. Now, in a group of maybe half of us are vegetarians, we might eat more unrefined. But the point is, even vegetarians eat the same foods over and over again, and they don't get a wide variety. So, why do we need a wide variety? Lots of color, and with all these vitamins, minerals, fiber, thousands, well, hundreds and perhaps thousands of phytonutrients, healthy proteins, healthy fats, and healthy carbs. I am not an aggressively low-fat recommender, low-fat diet recommender. And next week, I'll tell you why. Our brain dramatically needs healthy fats. And my classmate, Dr. Hans Diehl, promoted the low-fat diet. What was his CHIP program? He died of a stroke just a couple of weeks ago, or a few months ago. And he wasn't much older than me. I don't think he was any older than me, and I'm 27 years short of 100. So, while there's dramatic immediate benefits of extreme low-fat diet, a low-fat diet is not what we should follow for decades. That's my personal opinion. Yes. Healthy fats are extremely important. Unhealthy fats are extremely important to eat none of. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that next week when I talk about the 15 nutritional factors to pay attention to. So we want to eat more of these kinds of things that give us all of these nutrients and eat less of these processed foods, sugars, saturated fats. So sugar was kind of a bad guy 40 years ago, and so they created fake sugar, which was actually worse because of the increased risk of cancers. But the fake sugars still allowed your body to think you're eating sugar, and so it was a misnomer. Now, here's where I'm going to share some things now that might be new and interesting. What I've shared before, you've probably heard many times before, and it's good to be repeated. But here's some things that are new. We need to eat a wide variety of unrefined foods to get adequate zinc. All diabetics are deficient in zinc. So we gave all of our diabetics zinc supplements, in addition to good, healthy food that gave them zinc. Good sources of zinc include the legumes, nuts and seeds, whole grains, But what about if you've got celiac disease and can't eat whole grains? Well, you eat quinoa, oatmeal. What about oatmeal that still gives you diarrhea? Because it's oats, it's not whole wheat with gluten. Well, it's because that oatmeal, that oat farm, that oat field last year had wheat grown in it. And so the wheat has infected and partly adulterated the oats that are there. So some people are really, really sensitive. You know, now that I don't eat any gluten anymore, I can get by a little bit. I just choose not to because I love the way I feel without any gluten. And when we lived in Singapore and Thailand, we ate gluten beefsteaks, gluten pork chops, gluten chicken livers, gluten everything. Every Buddhist vegetarian restaurant we ate at was vegetarian, but they used gluten to make the product that the non-vegetarians ate. And in Asia, they eat everything except the hair of an animal and the toenails. I ate with a friend of mine. My hospital administrator in Singapore took us out to eat in Thailand. We had some meetings there, and his best friend met with us, and I ordered some noodles and vegetables with tofu. And my friend's invitation, or my friend's colleague, ate noodles and vegetables with chocolate-flavored tofu. And I looked at that and I marveled. I didn't say anything. So I asked my nurse when I got back home what that was. And she said, that wasn't chocolate-flavored tofu. That was dried blood. So my tofu is, whitish in color, chalky in color. And I thought his tofu was chocolate, was brown in color. Well, it wasn't tofu, it was dried blood. Our wonderful Asian folks historically eat everything except hair and toenails. And so this early thought that about COVID being transmitted through this animal was a distinct, kind of like a wild pig, but it wasn't a domesticated animal, but yeah. And the reason why we have Ebola and some of the other chronic Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and brain wasting diseases is because food is scarce in parts of Africa, and they go into the caves and they eat bats and they eat monkeys, and they come down with diseases that are not supposed to be transmitted to humans unless you eat them. Anyways, that's another story. Selenium. Selenium is present everywhere until the farmers over-harvest their crops. When I lived on a farm, my dad and my uncles grew a crop this year, and next year that was summer fallow. That was followed. No crop was grown there. They went over to this field, and they rotated. All fields were allowed to recover. We didn't use irrigation. We didn't use aggressive pesticides at the time. Today, they overfarm, and our soil in North America is pretty much depleted of selenium. And that's why selenium is an issue. So you want to eat nuts, seeds, whole grains, oatmeal, lentils, sunflower seeds, eggs, and dark chocolate. Wow, I said dark chocolate. How many of us love chocolate? I love chocolate. And I eat it once a week or so. I like to keep it in the freezer, so when I suck on it, it takes a long time to dissolve and digest. And I look forward to Christmas every year because I buy marzipan with dark chocolate covering. You know what marzipan is? It's just almond paste. Delicious sweetened almonds covered in dark chocolate. I had a story I was going to tell you, and I just lost it.
Can this also be a substitute?
Yes. Well, let me just tell you about supplements now. I recommend, balanced diet, wide variety of foods, and all that stuff. I also recommend everybody take a vitamin mineral supplement, but take half the dose that's on that bottle. Just because you will not eat a wide variety of unrefined foods all of the time. Years ago, dietitians did a study and they found out that people eat about 12 to 15 foods over and over and over again. Americans typically eat the best wide variety because we eat American, we eat Chinese, we eat Mexican, we eat Japanese, we eat Italian, and on and on. Mexicans only eat Mexican. Indian only eat Indian. Italian only eat Italian. But, in America, we are the great melting pot and we get a wide variety, and that's a good thing. But we still eat only 12 or 15 foods over and over again. In fact, I eat pizza every Thursday night. My wife makes it. It's good stuff. And I also eat it every Sunday evening because that's the leftover pizza from Thursday night. And I justify it because my wife put lots and lots of vegetables on it. Yes, I recommend taking a multivitamin every day, but take half a dose. No? Well, most of them say 2 capsules a day, so take 1. I have a vitamin that gives me 2 packages a day with 8 tablets in it, so I just take half of that in a day. Mm-hmm. We found that it's probably a good idea to emphasize the female vitamins versus the men vitamin, especially the men, because the men don't need the iron that the women do. And there's probably some other things. I've not followed that too closely, but we recommended women if you can find women vitamins, take them. And the most important thing with the men is not to take extra iron unless you need it for a medical reason. So work with your doctor on that. Women need the iron until menopause because they menstruate weekly. Men don't, but men should. It really help some men if they would menstruate a little bit because we have too much iron built up in our blood, many men.
Because I'm taking things.
I'd recommend you don't take a vitamin with an iron supplement unless your doctor tells you that you need an iron supplement. Or donate blood, they'll measure your iron, and if it's in the low normal iron, then take an iron supplement. But maybe not every day, every other day. Yes? Yeah, those are good ideas. There's a number of exotic salts out there. There's Himalayan salt is one of them. There's some others. Those sort of, I was going to call them natural salts, but it's not the word I'm looking for. But those salts have some extra vitamins and extra minerals in them, and they can be beneficial. But you want to make sure you're not taking too much salt if you have hypertension. Some people are very susceptible to higher salt if they have high blood pressure. Some people well, yes. Yeah. And that reminds me, 50 years ago when I had just graduated, while I was in school and graduated, there was a lot of mostly women on these protein fasting diets. The one back then was called, can't remember. But they were being admitted to the ER with heart attacks. These women were on these severe diets. And the doctors were losing them because they didn't know how to treat them, not realizing the diets they were on were significantly depleting their micronutrients that contract the heart muscle. Once they figured that out, they just gave them supplements to prevent that heart attack from progressing, and they saved, a couple of weeks later, they saved women, but during those first few weeks, women were dying from these NutriFast? No. Anyways, they were calorie deficient diets, but they were losing weight, so they wanted them. There's nothing wrong with losing weight unless it's the wrong way to lose weight. And once the doctors figured out they needed to give them these injections of micronutrients, they were able to save them in the emergency room. Iron, again, we've talked about iron. Okay, good sources there, legumes, whole grains, again, seeds, leafy greens. A lot of people don't eat seeds. Why? Well, there can be an issue with diverticulosis, which leads to diverticulitis, little pulches in your bowels, but they get stuck in your teeth. Yeah, but you have to have a diagnosis of diverticulosis before, and that's not common, but it certainly can happen if you don't have good bowel habits. I wasn't planning on talking about bowel habits today, but I can if someone asks me a question. Okay, good. No questions. That's what I mentioned. Eating the seeds can be a problem, but if you keep them on your grinders and chew them really well, but the sesame seeds and the flax seeds are too tiny for that to benefit. And if you observe your stool in the toilet, you'll find some of those seeds down there. And we like to do that, but we're used to doing that. Nurses too sometimes. You look at the bowel and see what's going on. Right, Anita? Jane? My wife doesn't, she's not here. She doesn't like me to talk about bowel stuff. Well, maybe she's wise also. So leafy greens, look at that for iron. And while I married a southern girl, and I loved okra, boiled and fried any which way, I just never could get used to the greens. So I'll have a fork full of greens, and that's it. But I make sure I take a good vitamin supplement. I can eat kale raw. And kale, I like kale as a lettuce in sandwiches, that's fine. But not greens. Not greens. There you go. And that reminds me, someone mentioned they don't like Brussels sprouts. For years, I never enjoyed Brussels sprouts because they were always presented to me boiled. And we went over to a friend's house a decade ago or so ago, and they were stir-fried, barbecued, and salted with garlic and salt and other, and they were the best Brussels sprouts. I never knew Brussels sprouts could taste so good. So maybe you're not using the right spices. Come on. Copper. Whoever talks about copper? No one ever talks about it, but it's extremely important for numerous functions in our body, especially the immune system, but nuts and seeds, sesame, sunflower, avocado, leafy greens. Again, I hate those leafy greens, but there's kale, Swiss chard, those are good. Yes?
Are you a green?
Okay, good question. That's a question.
I don't like kale, but I can drink.
Yeah. Here's the thing about juicing. And I mean this in a funny way. If God wanted us to drink our food, He would have given us something like a snout like an elephant. So it's okay to juice occasionally. But if that's your primary food source once a day, that may not be healthy for you. That's my basic answer I've given for decades. Now, some people have different immune systems that need to be treated a little bit differently, and the stomachs need to be treated a little bit differently. And while I'm not suggesting you should never juice, you need to be juicing from a dietitian's recommendations because of some chronic diseases going on or some inflammation or some, my father-in-law, he's since passed away, but he had 80% of his stomach removed when he was a teenager. That's how they treated bleeding ulcers back then. Carol. 20% of his stomach left, and when the surgeons go in and scope it, he says, "I can't believe the butchers that did this to you." He subsequently died of dementia, Alzheimer's, and stomach cancer, but his stomach was irritated his whole life. That's why he came down with stomach cancer, his last few years. But figure out these things earlier. And if your doctor isn't getting it, change doctors, or at least get second and third opinion. A very famous doctor, I've since forgotten his name, in Australia. Oh, I'm probably running over on time, aren't I? What time is it? Oh, it's only 8 o'clock. Famous doctor in Australia figured out that his patients who had stomach ulcers responded to an antibiotic. And it wasn't stress. It wasn't, some mind thing that was affecting him like all the other doctors had told him. So he began treating his patients vigorously with antibiotics. And they were getting better. He presented this in numerous papers in Australia, and he got ostracized. He almost got crucified. It was outside the usual and customary. But it took about 10 years for other countries to begin investigating this, and they finally realized there is a bacterium, Helicobacteria, I think it's called, something like that. Helicobacter pylori, I think. And you get the proper antibiotic, and it gets rid of 90% of all ulcers. So medical science is wonderful. And I also found out that many scientists pride themselves in being open-minded, as long as you agree with them. All right. Okay. Folic acid. Now, we never knew much about folic acid until there were some babies born with deficiencies, and so the obstetricians started giving them vigorous prenatal supplements, mostly because of folic acid. But folic acid is important too for immune system, good to help us repair DNA. Good sources: legumes, vegetables, fruits, wheat germ. How many of us eat wheat germ? Some of us do. We tried it for a while. It's okay. I don't have any problems with it. But
You don't eat it now?
no. Well, yeah. If you get it with your cereals or it's added to the wheat, yeah, I can't eat it. But anyways, I used to eat a lot. No matter what the elder President Bush said, broccoli is good for you. You remember that when that happened? He just didn't like broccoli. My wife thinks I don't like... My wife still thinks I don't like broccoli. I'll eat 3 pieces. She'll eat 8 or 10. She thinks I don't like broccoli. I love broccoli. I just want to eat other stuff on the plate too, and not too much of it. Vitamin A. Now, there are 2 classes of vitamins. There's fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K, and then there's water-soluble vitamins. The water-soluble vitamins we typically need to eat every day. The fat-soluble vitamins, any excess is stored in our liver and other places in our body. So you want to be careful about getting any excess of vitamins A, D, E, and K. Vitamin K is extremely important in bone health. A rich source of vitamin K is liver. Liver. I ate lots of liver as a child. I hope I never have to eat it again. But if I needed to walk across the country and had no food to eat, I'd be happy to eat a cow's liver to get there. But we don't live in situations like that anymore. We live in a country of abundance. So we have to be careful not to eat too much. Someone was saying something, I interrupted. Yeah, vitamin K is abundant in the brightly colored vegetables, leafy green vegetables. B6, again, immune system. Good sources, chickpeas, potatoes, carrots, edamame. I never knew what edamame was until we lived in Asia. It's just fresh, young soybeans. And then when they're roasted and put adequate salt and garlic on them, they're just delicious. You pop them open and eat the seed, and messy. Anyways, it's fun. Vitamin C, vitamin C pretty much found in fresh citrus and the colorful vegetables. Helps with wound infections, stimulates the white blood cells. Vitamin D, we call it the sunshine vitamin. If you're not taking enough, just about everybody can take 2,000 units a day. I don't think there's any risk of anybody taking 2,000 units. If you take 4,000 to 6,000 units a day for a couple of months, that's probably okay, but after that you need to have some blood tests to make sure you're not taking too much. So work that out with your doctor. I've known this for, 44 years. I did my first vitamin D test when I was in my mid-40s, and my vitamin D was 19, and it should be 50 or more. I was shocked. But that's because of my celiac disease. So the chronic disease can be insidious, could be hidden, you don't know about it until you get older. So don't get older. Yeah, and it's real easy to get a blood test, and your insurance will pay for a vitamin D hydroxy
Profile.
It's a blood test. The osteoporosis is a X-ray scan. It's called a DENSA scan to measure your blood, measure your bone density. Yeah, you want to take the 25 hydroxy. That's the proper one. Um, 70% decrease in respiratory infections after taking vitamin D, particularly important for lung and immunity. Michael Hollick is the vitamin D researcher in the Northeast, somewhere in the Boston area, I think. And he puts his older folks on 50,000 units of vitamin D for those that have severely low vitamin D in the Northeast for a few months, for a few weeks to get them up to running. Mr. Hadley, when he was alive, needed to take a vitamin D supplement by injection once a week. Because if you got blood disorders, you have to do something different. That raises the, did you hear his question? Does that much vitamin D give you a tan? No, but that reminds me, do men and women from African cultures, do they need to take vitamin D? And yes, they can get a sunburn too, just like you and I. It's really strange. I had a friend of mine in high school who got a sunburn. I said, why? How did you get a sunburn? Well, he can take more sun, but he still got a sunburn. Vitamin E. Most of us never even think about vitamin E. But it's part of that wide variety of unrefined foods. And we find, almonds, hazelnuts. I eat on nuts and seeds, not every day, but every week I get some nuts and seeds. And I chew them well, and you get a nice, delicious paste before you swallow it. But it's also found in mangoes. There's about 5 different kinds of mangoes. We never knew that until we lived in Asia. There's a sweet mango and a tart mango, and there's a soft mango, and there's a hard mango, and they're all good to eat. The only ones we get here are typically the Puerto Rican mangoes, which are the ones in between. They're not too sweet, they're not too hard. Squash and various plant oils. All of these, vitamin E is extremely important in increasing lymphocytes, immunoglobulins, and increases the natural killer cells. Fiber. The most important thing about fiber is decreasing our risk of bowel cancers. All cancers, but particularly bowel cancer. How do you know if you're getting enough fiber? And drinking enough water. Thank you. Thank you very much. I led you into that, but if we have good, healthy bowel habits and not constipated, what's the definition of constipation? I've had physicians at Loma Linda tell me, researchers tell me, if you're only having a bowel movement once every 2 or 3 days, that may not be constipation. So you need to look at your personal habits, your personal bowel habits, and I've also had many, here I go, oh boy. I've had many folks listening to these seminars over the years say, I've been told that since I'm a vegetarian, every time I eat a meal, I should have a bowel movement. And that's just wrong. That means there's some undigestible stuff. There's some inappropriate habits going on that if you're following good nutrition, exercise, and water, you don't need to have a bowel movement but once a week. Once a week. And once every 2 days is perfectly normal, unless you're suffering from constipation. Now, imagine you've got some residents in your facility, Anita. Imagine you've got some residents in your facility that constipation is a real issue. And I understand that. So we're not talking about them. But, and one of the best things about constipation is exercise and water and fiber. Exercises, you're massaging your bowels, fluid, and fiber. Yes? Yeah. Well, the bile acids are digested the fats in our body are digested by the bile acids, which primarily come from the gallbladder. They're stored in the gallbladder. They come from the liver. So when we don't have enough bile acids available to us, it's easy for us to get plugged up if we're not getting proper balance, proper nutrition, and some people just need to eat 4 or 5 meals a day and smaller amounts. Yeah, that dumping syndrome needs maybe 5 or 6 meals a day. In spite of what was said in the little red books, we should eat 2 meals a day. Yeah, we should eat 2 meals a day for those individuals that can benefit from 2 meals a day. And that's exactly what she would have said, I'm sure, if she was alive today. And she would have said, if you've got high blood pressure and your diet and exercise is not dealing with it, then you fool, take a blood pressure medicine because you don't want to die of a stroke. I've had arguments in classes like this, 100 people in a class were talking about blood pressure medicine. Oh, I will never take medicine. Okay. Let's talk about the side effects. What side effects? I don't want to take any blood pressure medicine because of its side effects. No, I want to talk about the side effects of high blood pressure. What? I feel fine. Then we talk about stroke and which side of the body do you want to be paralyzed and you know, stuff like that. And she said, wow, I never realized that. I'm going to take my blood pressure. My doctor's been telling me to take blood pressure medicine. Maybe I should take it. I don't know why this thing isn't working as well as I'd like it to be. So this is a general statement. Limit foods that increase inflammation. Well, everybody's a little bit different. What's inflammation? Bloating, overtiredness, susceptible to infections. I noticed here in America, when I'd wear my sandals and get a scratch on my foot, no big deal. When I got a scratch on my foot in Thailand, every time it got infected. Different bugs over there. So I aggressively treated myself and my kids with antibiotics on little tiny infections in our feet. Also tested ourselves for worms in Thailand, and one of my sons had worms, and I figured all of us had them. We weren't just noticing as much. So I treated myself, all my family, and myself for a year after we came back from overseas with worm medicine. I was trying to think of the Latin name for it, and it slips me. Anyways, and that's another thing. If you've been overseas for a while and did a mission trip and you came back and you're got some issues that are going on and the doctor can't figure it out, go to Walter Reed because they have the best infectious disease unit there in America. The local labs don't know how to test for little tiny parasites and little tiny beasties going around in our blood and in our stool. They're used to the roundworm and the pinworm, and that's pretty much all they're used to. And they can do a good job with that. So those are things we should eat less of, or some of us eat none of those. I can't remember the last time I've had a soda. But if you need a soda once or twice a week, it's no big deal. But if it's 2 or 3 times a day, that's a problem. And if I do get a soda, I'm going to get it with sugar in it. Do you know how hard it is to find an iced tea in the South with no sugar? It's impossible. And well, yeah, I got to eat the unsweetened one, and it tastes terrible. And when I'm driving, I don't have any problem drinking coffee or eating caffeine or iced tea because lead poisoning or steel poisoning is more of a problem than a little bit of sugar. I want to stay awake and have an accident. I've fallen asleep 3 times in my life driving. Both times I woke up before I crashed. And that just frightens me, so I liberally consume coffee and iced tea when I travel, and I get very constipated for 2 or 3 days. Oh, I shouldn't talk about that. I know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Huh? Fear. Yeah, that works. Yeah, when you're driving. So, the red and processed meats and the hot dogs and bacon. If you're not eating Canadian hot dogs or not eating Canadian bacon, you're not eating good bacon or good hot dogs. I just got to tell you that. Now, I also got to tell you, I had some time in a meat packing plant, and it's okay to tell you guys, you probably don't eat too much of that, but when I'm telling this story to a heavy meat-eating population, they don't like to hear that the hot dogs are made from all the stuff that falls down on the floor when they're cutting up a cow. When I lived on a farm, We made our own hot dogs and sausage. And we made it out of sirloin and T-bone steak and rump roast. It was the best cuts of the meat of that cow on the farm. And my farmer brothers and my cousins still harvest their own meat, and they make good meat. In fact, I raised my children to be vegetarian. We went uptown. We went up to Canada for a short trip. And I said, sure, you can eat. We'll just have lots of fruits and vegetables, but, you know, my kids will eat the meat because they've never tasted it before, and I'm going to let them taste it. And that Canadian-made, not farm lot-made meat almost melts in your mouth. Not like the stuff that's available at Ingles or other stores here. Now, I'm not suggesting we should eat meat, but I'm saying there's a difference. There's a difference. Eat more of these things. The vegetables, tomatoes, extra virgin olive oil, green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, many different kinds of fruits and berries, especially the berries, and foods high in omega-3 fats. And I didn't bring a chart on that. But notice how much color is in here. That's a great benefit. Yes? Yes, you do. If it's dark chocolate. Not the regular chocolate. Whoops. That was the last slide. I can't bring it up anymore. It's smaller now, but I went to the top. Anyways, I had just a general slide saying, follow the good, healthy principles, do the best you can, and nothing dramatic. So hopefully, with the first half or so, I stimulated you on what you know already. Maybe you'll do it better. And the last half is why. You know, selenium, vitamin B6, and folic acid, and so many of these other things that we don't typically think about. That's why I recommend eating a vitamin mineral supplement. Just half the dose that's on the bottle. That's at least what you need. Maybe you need a full dose, but I wouldn't worry about that. At least half a dose. Any questions? Any more questions? Uh-huh. Yes.
It just passes. And then
Or meditation.
well, they didn't talk about meditation. They talked about self.
And all those 8 natural remedies are well documented in the Old Testament of the Bible. We forget about them. And, you know, this thing about coughing is a good idea. You know, this thing about staying away from infected folks is a good idea. And that's why Mrs. Hadley, she's 94 years old. My wife and I retired to come and take care of her mother. She's 94 and she won't come back to church again because there's too many people in church. And she's missing out on some socialization, but she's got a sharp mind. She can't hear very well. She can't see very well. And bless her heart. And she's got balance issues, but she hangs on to us everywhere we go, and we're going to keep her alive as long as possible. Yes?
Surprise about our insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Gives us gift cards.
Yep.
At the end of every gift week.
Mm-hmm.
Go to church. If you call your family.
Good for them. Yeah.
If you volunteer something. If you
Wow.
You accumulate all these points.
Wow.
Oh, also, if you see your doctor.
Yeah.
I-
That's wonderful.
They are recognizing that, of course, they want healthier clients.
Yeah. You've heard about the blue zone and these 6 areas of the world where people typically live 100 years or more, and Loma Linda, California is one of them. The U.S. News and World Report, a magazine, a very popular consumer magazine, said there's 11 things you need to do to enhance your ability to live to be 100 years of age. Number 7 is live like a Seventh-day Adventist. And this is in the U.S. News and World Report back about a decade ago. And I'll try and remember to bring that next week. So next week, we're talking about things to do for mind health. There are 15 things that I'm going to emphasize for mind health. 10 things you need to do more of, and 5 things you need to do less of. And it's okay if you don't do any of those 5, maybe. We're going to talk about that next week. And then in January, we've got three programs. January 4, Dr. Todd Morton, he's a psychologist, is going to talk about depression, what it is and how to treat it. Then on January 9, Dr. Markoff is going to talk about exercise and some unique things about exercise that I didn't take the time to go through. And then on January 11, Dr. Morton, again a psychologist, is going to talk about anxiety and what it is and what you can do about it. So you're welcome to come back to those. Yes? Oh.
For kids. And that raises.
There's an endorphin. I've got an endorphin lecture I used to give, but there's an endorphin response to being happy. There's an endorphin response. After about 30 to 45 minutes of exercising, you get excessive endorphins produced. These are natural narcotics. Okay? Some people actually get addicted to exercise because of the endorphin response. Now, those are addictive, dependent personalities. I read a study, and I was going to participate in the study, and I funded a study, but then I moved out of the country. But singing hymns, singing uplifting hymns, increases an endorphin response as well. What happens when we sing rock and roll? Well, I think the alcohol that's associated with the rock and roll diminishes any benefit, usually. But yes, singing is an endorphin response. That's part of the positive nature of human nature. By the way, every Thursday, yeah. So thank you so much for being here. I'm just tickled that anybody showed up. And true.
Gerald, thank you for the.
Thank you. George. Oh, yeah. I've not heard of that. Okay. You're right. Don't use your phone. Don't use your telephone or your screen. Red light. That's a good idea. Good to know. Thank you.
Deserves the melatonin. It's a good Christmas present, a red night light.
Thank you all for being here. I'm just tickled that anybody showed up.